Chapter 1. The Life and Afterlife of Ben Gunn. As he raised a steel chair leg in the air and brought it down onto the head of his new friend, Ben's life began. It was just after 7 p.m. on the 9th of April 1980 on a school playing field in Brecon, Wales. "My life started then," said Ben. "Everything before that is irrelevant." Ben was 14. His victim, Brian, was 11. Earlier that day, they'd escaped from their care home. In the grounds of an empty school, they discovered a pile of broken furniture and had a play fight. When they were finished, Ben accidentally let slip a secret. He couldn't believe what he'd said. If his confession was revealed, he felt sure he'd be rejected by all of society, spat on in the street, rendered utterly worthless. There was no thought process. I just knew I'd told him, and he'd tell the world. I was overwhelmed by emotion. Within a second, I was hitting him with a chair leg because I knew I'd destroyed myself. Ben ran to a phone box and dialed 999. "I've killed a boy. I hit him with a stick and I think I strangled him." Brian was found with a piece of his skull missing. He died 3 days later at Cardiff Royal Infirmary. Ben only discovered he was dead when his solicitor told him, "Well, you know it's going to be murder now." "Did nobody tell you?" When they sentenced him to an indefinite term at Her Majesty's pleasure, he was wearing his school uniform. They took him down before the judge had even finished his summing up. "You killed a boy without rhyme or reason. You brought his life to an end without any motive in circumstances which you know amounted to murder." In prison, they treated him as if he was worthless. During an early cell search, they piled everything on the floor, all my clothes, bedding, everything I owned, then just marched out. Ben was outraged. He refused to tidy up and slept on the floor for 3 nights. A direct order was issued. He still refused. They sent him to solitary confinement. There he sat, alone, in a cold cell. This was his world now. He was a child murderer, the lowest of the low. He had nothing. He was no one. Ben attempted escapes. He tried to starve himself to death. At his first parole hearing, 10 years into his sentence, he was denied release. They denied him again and again. 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, and then 25, Ben remained in prison. Then, in the summer of 2007, he fell in love with Alex, a visiting teacher. "He wore khaki and had a beard down to here," she told me. "He looked like a cross between Osama bin Laden and Rasputin, and carried this dirty water jug filled with coffee. I asked, 'Who's that?' They said, 'That's Ben Gunn. Keep out of his way.'" But Alex and Ben began flirting. They had sex in a stationery cupboard. They'd communicate in secret, with Alex typing into Ben's computer, so it looked as if she was helping him with his classroom studies, but the words were of love and desire. They'd swap hundreds of post-it notes and voice recordings on memory sticks. Ben would call her on a contraband mobile phone at 12 p.m, 4:30 p.m, and 9 p.m. every day. By 2010, Ben had been in prison for 30 years, 3 times longer than his minimum tariff demanded. He should have been released decades ago. But every time an opportunity for parole came up, he managed to supply the prison service with a new reason to deny it. The MP Michael Gove, who'd been campaigning for his release, told the Times newspaper he thought there was perhaps a self-destructive element in his makeup, because the prison authorities always have a misdemeanour to report, some serious, never violent, some trite, to prevent parole being granted. To encourage him out, Alex would paint him pictures of the things they'd be able to enjoy together on the outside. The cottage in the country, the fire in the winter, the cat. She couldn't understand it. He could have her and everything else he wanted. All he had to do was behave. Why was he refusing? Then, one day, Ben told her straight, "I want to stay." If life is as we imagine it, this doesn't make sense. It was all there waiting for Ben. Freedom, love, and a beautiful cottage in the Cotswolds. This was a religious parable, a Hollywood ending, the archetypal story of heroic redemption. He'd atoned for his sins, and here was his final destination, his glorious reward. But Ben didn't want it. He preferred to stay in prison. What had happened to make him cling to life inside? How had he rescued himself from the psychological depths of attempting suicide by starvation? When you take a human and strip them of all the esteem they desire, when you lock them in a dismal building with criminals and a prison staff that treats them with bullying contempt, how can they save themselves? How does a brain, with hundreds of thousands of years of evolution built into it, respond to such a situation? It builds a life for itself, a characteristically human life. Years earlier, Ben had started to study. He read up on Zen Buddhism, military history, politics and physics. He gained a degree in politics and history, a master's in peace and reconciliation, began a PhD in criminology, and was appointed General Secretary of the Association of Prisoners. I became known as the subversive, the political animal, the jailhouse lawyer. He also became a vegan, not so much as a moral thing, as being a pain in the arse. One lunchtime, to annoy him in return, the prison service presented him a meal of mashed potato and boiled potato with a baked potato on the side. Ben made a life for himself by playing a game he thought of as resisting abuses of power. He came to excel at it. In all his time inside, he only ever met one prison governor he considered knew the rules as well as he did. Ben would help other prisoners fight the system, sometimes tying officers up for months with densely argued appeals to the most trivial misdemeanor charges. He became notorious with the officials. The parole board declared him a fully paid-up member of the awkward squad. He was a success. He was someone in prison, Alex told me. And I knew that would change as soon as I got out, said Ben. I'd go from being a medium fish in a small pond to being just another ex-con. To coax him out, Alex encouraged him to write a blog. The first post on Prisoner Ben was published on the 31st of August 2009. Readership grew to over 20,000. In 2011, it was nominated for a prestigious Orwell Prize. And finally, Ben changed his mind. On the 23rd of August 2012, aged 47, prisoner 12612 Gunn was released. Before he left, a member of the prison staff gave him a warning. You're going to lose what status you have in here. What did he mean by that? I asked. As a lifer, you have a particular place in the prison hierarchy, and as a jailhouse lawyer you do too, he said. All these things give you status, and I knew as soon as I walked out they'd be irrelevant. As far as I could tell, those officers had been right. Since his release, Ben had been struggling. Thin, pale, shaven-headed, rolling narrow cigarettes and sitting in the sunny garden room of Alex's Cotswolds cottage, he'd vividly described his collapse into despair. On some unconscious level, it was deeply disturbing being released. I was sitting on the floor for 2 weeks, rocking back and forth. I could see where I was in prison. I knew who I was and what I wanted to be. Now I'm completely lost. I'm imploding. And yet, when I inquired as to whether the officers were correct in predicting he'd suffer from a precipitous drop in status, he denied it. When asked why we do the things we do, we rarely say, it's because of status. I really love it. It can be distasteful to think of it as any kind of motivating force, let alone a vital one. It contradicts the heroic story we like to tell of ourselves. When we pursue the great goals of our lives, we tend to focus on our happy ending. We want the qualification, the promotion, the milestone, the crown. If our need for status is so fundamental, this discomfort we feel towards it may seem surprising. But that's the game. To admit to being motivated by improving our rank is to risk making others think less of us, which loses us rank. Even admitting it to ourselves can make us feel reduced. So our awareness of our desire for status eats itself. We readily recognise it in rivals, and even use it as a method of insult, which ironically is status play, an attempt to downgrade others and thereby raise ourselves up. Because it has a canny way of hiding itself like this, let's drag our quarry from its guilty corner. Status isn't about being liked or accepted. These are separate needs associated with connection. When people defer to us, offer respect, admiration or praise, or allow us to influence them in some way, that's status. It feels good. Feeling good about it is part of our human nature. It's in our basic coding, our evolution, our DNA. And it doesn't require a stupendous achievement like scoring a goal in the World Cup or blowing up the Death Star. We can feel the velvet touch of status repeatedly throughout the course of a single conversation or in the glance of a passing stranger. Whenever we're in the presence of humans, consciously or unconsciously, we're being judged, measured. And their judgments matter. Wherever psychologists look, they find a remarkably powerful link between status and well-being. One study of more than 60,000 people across 123 countries found people's well-being consistently depended on the degree to which people felt respected by others. Attainment of status or its loss was the strongest predictor of long-term positive and negative feelings. Elsewhere, an extensive review of the scientific literature concluded that the importance of status was observed across individuals who differed in culture, gender, age, and personality. The relevant evidence suggests that the desire for status is indeed fundamental. Ben's story is a profound lesson in how to live. It shows us that it's possible to survive everything being taken from us. We can become despised by society, classed a child murderer, and have a brutal force such as the prison service ranged against us. We can hit such depths of torment that we refuse to eat for 43 days, starving until we feel our eyeballs drying out. And yet out of these circumstances of grotesque debasement, we can flourish. Ben built a life of meaning and purpose, and he did it by plugging himself into a set of like-minded brains and playing a game in which the goal was to earn status. His rank as a lifer and jailhouse lawyer gave him deference and respect. He became useful to his co-players in their conflicts against the prison staff. He grew to be admired and valuable. He invested all the efforts of his days, months and years into the playing of this game. He created a world of meaning for himself. Then, after prison, he collapsed. When freedom means expulsion from the meaning you've spent your life making, then freedom is hell.